Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast, where I teach educated, successful couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships so that you can stop compromising and start feeling fully alive in your relationship. I'm Alexandra Stockwell, aka the Intimacy Doctor. I'm a physician, a relationship and intimacy coach, and I'm an intimate marriage expert. My husband and I have been married for 26 years. We have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing marriage. I've shown hundreds of couples how to do so as well. So if you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how. Now, let's dive in. This interview is going to be different than others, mostly because I'm going to start talking about my own journey a little bit. For those of you who've read my book, Uncompromising Intimacy, and actually, if you haven't, I highly recommend that you do, you know that I was deeply influenced in all kinds of ways by my parents' divorce when I was 9-10 years old. One of the ways that I was influenced that I don't believe I've written about or spoken about publicly is that it also really shifted my physique. Before my parents were divorced, I was relatively petite and healthy and active. And if you look at the pictures from that time in my life, you can see within about a year of my parents' divorce, I became rounder. And while I've been rounder and overweight to varying degrees ever since then, I definitely associate that time with having set me up for a certain emotional relationship to eating. Now, that time in my life was incredibly important and has influenced my whole purpose professionally in teaching people how to have really fantastic relationships in all of the ways that communication, emotional, and sensual intimacy pertain. And I haven't ever really talked about this angle. But now that my youngest child is 10 years old and all kinds of other things have fallen into place beautifully, and I've done a lot of deep internal work, I decided it was time to reconfigure and rework my relationship to my body. And I have lost 40 pounds since taking a step in that direction. And I have done that with my coach, Jared McDonald, who is here with his wife, Joni, our guest today on the Intimate Marriage Podcast. And I was having a conversation with him in the context of me being his client. And Jared mentioned something about how he and Joni use health and have a value of health in a way that really deepens and enhances their marriage. So knowing me, what was my response? It was to invite them to teach all of you about how that is so that you can hear the nuance of how facing these challenges, I'll just say, can really enhance a relationship. So I think that's enough about me, and let's turn to them. So a warm welcome, Jared and Joni.
Thank you. Thanks. We're glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're here. I haven't done a conversation like this ever where we're really focusing on health. I think as a physician, I take all kinds of health-related matters for granted, and then I focus on other things. So I'm happy to get into this. And maybe let's start by hearing, Jared, how did you come to be a health coach? You've done all kinds of interesting things in life. What has you contributing to the world in this way at this time?
I always say that it actually started with my own, we got kids here, so people here too. So It started with
Yes. How old are your children so people can enjoy the
yeah, so
sounds?
we got a 1-year-old little boy and a almost 4-year-old little girl. So he's
Okay, so this is family life, and we're going to keep going.
we're gonna keep going. Um, so I have diabetes. I have type 1 diabetes. Had it since I was 4, and my dad's a doctor, and so my whole life was like health oriented. But I was always like a little bit overweight. I always felt like chubbier than my friends, if you will, is what I mean by that. And then in college, it got the worst. And then after we both actually graduated college is when we met. Shortly after we met, which is, this is a marriage podcast. So we'll just say we met on an airplane, or at least boarding an airplane, which is
Oh,
really
really?
a fun story.
Where were you? Where were you, and where were you going?
I was coming back from a graduate school. I was actually going to graduate school for clinical psychology, and PhD program. She is a dancer, was a dancer, and she was coming back from Oregon.
I was coming back from
or San Francisco.
Yeah.
Dancing out there. So we had a layover in Las Vegas. We lived in Utah at the time. And I thought, cute girl going to Utah. There's no wedding ring on her finger. Thought, hey, what the heck? I'll just strike up a conversation. And we were both boarding the airplane. We were kind of like the last people to board. And then we started chatting. And I just asked her if she was going home or going on a trip. And anyway, we both found out we lived in the same city, went to the same college. And then it was Southwest, luckily, and so you got to choose your seats. And so we sat across the aisle from each other and just chatted for
Southwest should really do a whole ad campaign.
We should like target. We should tag them in this.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
So we just started chatting the whole way home, and it was like what, a 2 hour and a half flight.
Yeah,
it wasn't very long. From Vegas to Utah. And so it was very natural after that. I always jokingly say, Joni asked for or she said, why don't you get my number? But I was going to ask you anyway. So it was very normal, very natural, that we just kind of hit it off and started, kind of spending time after that together. And, anyway.
And so wait, before you tell more about your health journey, that story is just permeated with ease. Has that ease characterized your life together in general, or was that just the beginning?
Joni?
Yeah, let's hear from you, Joni. I want the woman's perspective on this one.
I mean, I think Jared and I have a lot of similar goals and standards, I guess you would say. And so in that way, there's ease, but I mean, it's still a relationship. So
I would say our marriage, not marriage, but our life has not been easy. But from that, but our marriage, I feel like, I mean, of course we work at it. We have to work at it like anything, but I feel like we have a great relationship, which I feel like, here's Indy. I feel like we have a great relationship, and it's very easy that way. Despite having a lot of challenges, and a lot of it actually is health related, for us. So,
say more.
Yeah. So after we got married, we actually lived in a house with mold. The first house we moved into, we like painted it. We were super stoked. It was like an old house, tons of character, but it had mold, and we didn't know this, of course. Well, we actually saw it, but we didn't think anything of it. And then Joni started getting sick and reacting to foods, and like just kind of debilitating at times. And I always say, long story short, we went on a big, long health journey, started researching, started learning, working with doctors all over. We had a doctor in California at the time that we flew out or drove out to and started seeing, and then worked remotely with. And this was like 10 years ago, because we'd ended up having some health issues that, like, kind of the conventional approach, if you will, didn't give us any answers. And so we just kind of started researching, like, what's going on underneath the like symptoms that's causing the symptoms for her, to kind of figure it out. And anyway, connected the dots that it was about mold. And, your original question of like, what inspired me to get into this was, I lost a bunch of weight along the way. Like, I think one day I remember we were in Orem, Utah, in a basement apartment. Came out of the bathroom. I was like, Joni, have you noticed I just lost like 30 something pounds? I didn't even have a scale, but I was like, I don't even know what happened. And it just like went away. And so,
but just to be clear, in other words, you were implementing the necessary health changes for Joni to recover from the impact of the mold exposure. And in the process, you noticed you were losing weight.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the big
amazing.
Yeah, we made a big change with our food and the kinds of food we were eating. And I mean, I wasn't tracking. I'm sure we like to be active. She's a professional dancer. I played sports, so we exercised together and enjoyed that. But it was more food that made the huge difference for us.
For sure.
And for me,
And Joni, did that was it changes with food? I'm guessing additional things too, but you recovered fully from the exposure from the mold disease?
Yeah, I mean it's a long process and it's more like an autoimmune situation, so it's kind of a lifelong thing, but it made it so that I was able to function.
Mm-hmm.
As before it was like not functioning at all, like in bed 24/7. So switching over the way that we were eating allowed it to like calm down, and from there I've had tons and tons of healing. So I would say yes. I mean, you always kind of have to
be aware
of it because it's autoimmune. So it can go into remission. So that's kind of basically what it is. It's gone into remission, but it could flare up again, but hasn't really. So.
And will you just, in very broad strokes, while 1-year-old Wells is chirping away in the background, will you just say, really very simply, the changes that you made, Joni, in terms of the food, like just in broad strokes?
Yeah. I think, originally the changes that we made maybe are different now, but originally, at the time I had to cut out gluten and dairy, and just focus on really nutrient dense foods. So, lots of animal proteins, lots of fruits and vegetables. What else?
Okay, no, that's good enough. I just don't want it to be mysterious.
Yeah, no, and another key word that I recommend to everybody on all my videos online is anti-inflammatory. That was a huge thing for anyway, so anti-inflammatory is key. A lot of Joni's issues were inflammatory, and a lot of autoimmune issues are like I have type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune issue. And so in changing our diet and eating more anti-inflammatory and nutrient dense, which is a funny word that people don't realize, but it's so key in the health world, that even my insulin, like I dropped it by like 3/4 of what I was taking during this journey. And so yeah, that's kind of probably the first year and a half, I would say, of our marriage. That all happened, like just a lot of learning, a lot of researching, understanding, traveling, seeing doctors. And I think I got a lot healthier. Joni got a lot healthier and started being able to actually function, which was huge as far
Okay,
as.
I'd actually like to ask another question about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that is the answer to why you're now a health coach, right? Jared, is there anything else you want? Okay.
Yeah.
So, in most marriages, especially when it's very early in the marriage, but honestly at any time, when there's a health crisis, it causes a major strain on the relationship. It often leads to disconnection and misunderstandings and unmet expectations. And I don't happen to have numbers right in front of me, but one person having a serious illness definitely is a contributing factor to divorce when it gets all the way to that extreme. But if nothing else, it's a time that even when it's over, it still has a big influence on the relationship. I'm not getting any of that vibe in how you're speaking. So is that because you haven't said it, or because you have some guidelines that you can identify in hindsight that allowed this to be what essentially sounds like was a nourishing time in your life, at least once you cracked the code on what needed to happen?
Yeah, I think from day one, when we started doing some research and kind of talking to different doctors and making these changes, Jared jumped on board from day one. So it was never like I was doing this thing over here and he was doing this thing over here. We really meshed from the beginning, and it's very much tribute to his personality, honestly. And so always felt like we were in this together. It never felt like it was I mean, It was a strain in that it was just really hard, like life wise, but it was never a strain between us. It was very much like he just jumped on and was like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to do this together. And why wouldn't I make these changes too? I absolutely will make these changes. So,
okay, I think that's so profound. I'm going to state it as a really simple principle, which is that he didn't look at it as your problem. He looked at it as our problem. And sometimes that's an expression of codependence, and sometimes that's an expression of the most magnificent, healthy devotion.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say too, I think before going, I mean, we were like newly married, right? And so going into the marriage, we both kind of took the attitude, we're both religious and we believe that like marriage is like forever, like this is us, like divorce isn't an option for us. We want to work at this, we want to really make this work our whole lives and afterwards. And one of the things that her dad actually said when I was asking for permission to marry her, which is kind of old school that way, and we were driving in his truck and I and he said, well, the one advice I have is that your life's no longer really yours, meaning that like it's your life together now. Like you just kind of have to give up your own pride and your own like selfish desires that like you're going to work together on things and you can't just go do whatever you want because you're married now. And we didn't have kids at the time, which I think would have maybe could have thrown a bigger wrench in the problem because you're now having to deal with kids. And but like for both of us, I think now having that mentality and having the experience with our health, like no matter what happens, if it's our kids' health, which we always like have to worry about them and their issues because we've got issues and genetics there. And so it's like, we're just doing it. We're going to do it together because that's what for us marriage is all about. So I think it allowed us to pull together and we tried hard to, I mean, my undergraduate degree is in marriage studies. So like, I was like, yeah, we're doing this. Like, that's what I wanted to be, was a marriage and family therapist. And so like, we'd like listened to a lot of tapes and read books together early on in our marriage and dating about how to have strong marriages or how to have a strong marriage. And so I think that helped, just having the attitude of like, no matter what, like we're going to figure this out together. So it's never her thing. It's never my thing. It's our thing. And we're going to make it our thing, regardless of whose thing it really is. It doesn't matter because it's our thing. So I think that's probably the thing that's like, it's an underlying current, I feel like, in our marriage that perpetuates us forward.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And I'm glad you said that. I'm wondering, it's a very clear principle, the way you articulate it, that it's not her problem or my problem, it's our problem, or it's not my life, it's our life together. Were there ever any moments when you knew that was true and you wanted to honor that deeply held conviction, but it wasn't always clear exactly how to implement the idea? Or was it always clear?
I don't think no, it's never been clear. I mean, health is a messy subject. Like when you get into like how to change, and there's so many like, I mean, this is something my clients deal with all the time, is like, what do I do with my health? There's so many varying degrees of what it looked like, but I think we just kind of dove in and we were both open to like whatever it looked like. I think there were times where I struggled maybe more than her. I remember one vivid time. This was like the last time I ever had like something super sugary and processed. I was sitting at work and somebody brought donuts in, and that's like my week. I love donuts, and I haven't had like a traditional Krispy Kreme type donut in like 10 years, which sounds crazy to people. We still have other kinds of treats and stuff, but I remember texting her being like, I had a donut. And then I texted her again and said I had 2 donuts. And it was like we were changing. She had already made like a huge change. And this was like 6 months in. And I remember being like, no, like we're going to do this together. So I'm making a change too. And from that day forward, I just said, like, we're not, like, I got to change. She's way more like disciplined and hardcore than I am in most areas. I'm like the one, like I always say, like, she knows as much about health as I do. And I'm a health coach. So no, she's awesome that way. But I had to like come along and I said, no, like, we're going to figure this out and do it together. And anyway, I don't know if that answered that question, but I think there was some times for me, I know that because I have addictive patterns. I've been in 12-step programs for a lot of years before, for all sorts of things. And so I tend to go into that. And so I have to like constantly work at that, where she's pretty just like, I'm just going to do it, and does it. So anyway, so for me, I know that was like a time where I was like, am I really going to do this? And I said, yeah, like we got to do it. So.
Okay. Well, Joni, I know this is ancient history of essentially. But what was that like when you got the text, I just had a donut, and then I just had
I
a second
remember that.
donut? What happened for you?
It's more funny than anything. It was never, for me, it was never like you have to do this or a force type situation at all. It was very much his choice. So it was more funny than anything because I do remember that day because he was like, I just feel so sick because we were shifting the way we eat. And then when you like bring in that processed food, you do feel really, really gross. Like it
Like physically, you feel bad.
like you just feel not super great. So I do remember that. And mostly just thinking it was funny. It was just like, sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't like I had to like be accountable to her.
No.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
wondering.
no,
If
it
it was
wasn't like
like,
she was my coach.
oh my goodness, he's at
No,
it again, or okay.
it was more like I was just like I was being open, and I like we believe in being honest, but I think there's a difference between honesty and openness. You can be honest without being open. So I was trying to be
Yes,
open,
yes.
and I was trying to actually like share that like, hey, I'm struggling. Like this is a day. This was a time I had a struggle. So anyway, it wasn't ever like a you have to do this or I had to be accountable to her. Sometimes that I know because I work with a lot of couples that one is not on board with health and the other is, and so that can be a really area of
Right,
conflict.
right. I'm familiar with that too. It's what
Yeah.
has driven a number of my questions. Well, um, another thing that I encounter a lot in clients for various reasons, either because they're each ambitious, hardworking professionals, or because of the children, or probably the compounded effect of both. But parents, individuals who feel like they don't have time. They don't have time for exercise. They don't have time to tend to their health, which of course then impacts all the other elements in marriage. And so shifting away from what you navigated 10 years ago, now here you are, you have a 1 year old and how old is?
She's almost four.
Four. That's what I thought you said. Okay, 4 year old. Um, how is it that health continues to vitalize your marriage and be one of the things that bonds you? Not certainly not the only one, but one of them.
Yeah. I'll say what I think, and then she can say what she thinks. I think so. And just for context, we've got this 1 year old, and he does not sleep. We are currently remodeling our house. So if you could actually see what's going on around us, it's kind of chaos. It looks really nice here, but we're like, our floors are ripped up, we're repainting. So our life in the last year has actually been quite chaotic. I mean, pretty much sheer chaos a lot of the times. We travel a lot to go back and we live in Idaho to Utah. So anyway, last year has been a lot. But I always talk about this idea that exists in like all contexts, like ethical, moral, religious, but we've applied it to our health is it's kind of an identity to where like for Joni and I, like fitness and exercise hasn't been a really big focus just because like for the last year, because we're just, it's different now than before. Like I can't wake up early and go exercise for an hour in the gym because like Joni didn't sleep in the nighttime. And so I take the kids and let her sleep, type of thing. And so, but as far as like food choices and health choices, that's who we are. That's our identity now. Kind of like brushing your teeth is an identity, or religious identities that form behaviors, or sports teams. Like you're a Steelers fan, or you're a Giants fan, or you're whatever, like your thing is like, you're going to do behaviors based on that. You're going to buy certain trucks, certain clothes. You're going to behave a certain way as a parent, as a person, based on the belief systems you hold of who you are. And so because we've identified that, like, hey, Betty, because we've
Wells agrees.
Wells agrees. He's here. We've identified as like, that's who we want to be, is we want to focus on foods. We often talk about how do we nourish our children? How do we fuel their body full of nutrient dense foods? How do we eat foods that don't cause disease? Now, it's different than when we were first learning this. We're like, oh, this food, and we had to identify these foods. Now it's just kind of like, we don't buy certain foods that have certain ingredients. We like cook a lot. And so we just kind of tag team it. But I think for us, that's like kind of like I mentioned before, like an underlying current in our lives that propels us forward. Is it's just kind of, there's no real other option for us. Like sure, we could eat other foods, but because this is the life we've chosen, we've kind of surrendered that idea, and there's no other option. It's kind of like if I don't do drugs, or like I don't I don't like do like, I don't steal from the grocery store. There's certain behaviors and morals and ethics that I hold, and that's who I am. So there's no other option. Like nobody has to, like, if somebody said, hey, let's go like steal from the grocery store, I'd be like, no, like there's no way I'm going to do that based on who I believe I am. And so I kind of treat it the same way with food, is that like, I don't have to question if I'm going to eat something that's not super great for me, because that's just who we are. And I think we both are that same way. And so when I don't have to question her, she doesn't have to question me. We just eat the same stuff. We buy the same things. I'm never like, hey, let's just go to McDonald's, or she's never like, hey, let's do this. And because it's kind of I think an identity for both of us that we've just developed in our marriage. So
yeah, I really love how you use the word identity. It's like, this is who we are. It's not something that needs to be negotiated fresh each day or each week or each year. It's like, this is who we are. And the way I usually speak about that is to be really intentional about the culture of the marriage. Mm-hmm. And it's like having the identity of being healthy contributes to a health-oriented culture. What is your take on that, Joni? Or your experience?
Yeah, I think for me, our life does feel very chaotic at the moment. And it's just, there's a lot of shifts that happen when you have kids, and even from one child to two child. And I imagine beyond that, like
there's child number 2 chiming in with great agreement.
There's a lot of ebb and flow that happens, and a lot of grace that you kind of have to have for you and the other person. But for me, I feel like food is something that I use to, like, I don't know if this is the right term, but help. In that, like, for me, if Wells was up a whole bunch that night and I didn't get any sleep, I'm going to really focus on, we think about, not eating certain foods, but for me, it has always been foods that I need to incorporate and like really focus on, and, thinking about what my kids needs, bringing in more, for lack of a better term, nutrient dense foods into our lives kind of have helped us navigate that. And that's kind of the undercurrent that has always kind of stayed, because yeah, as of right now, exercise is hard. It's hard to find the time. And so you're doing like 15-minute walks and, 10-minute workouts, and just finding the time that you can. But food is always something that feels consistent, I guess. And like a help, like what does my family need right now? Okay, let's figure out what we can make this week to really like boost their nutrient, help us function better.
I love that, food as a help really for life.
Yeah. And if I can, I'll mention this, like, because this is what I do. Like, a lot of times in life, we don't correlate how we feel or our focus or our children's behavior and various things like that with food. And oftentimes it's actually very much connected. Like, if Wells doesn't sleep great one night, we're always looking at like, well, what did we eat during the day that maybe affects him more, he has more sensitivities to, and everybody's different with that. But like, a lot of times children, I worked for many years with child developmental kind of disorders and learning issues and things like that. And it was very much tied to food. And if you change your food, a lot of times you can change your mood and your behavior. And so anyway, that's what I mean. Like, food has been a help for us. So if we can find days and meals where like, okay, let's use food to fuel our bodies, our mood is more stable. We're less irritable towards each other. We're just easier to manage our children. Like, it's like, I say that, not manage, but our children, like, they're just not so like ups and downs emotionally. They're more like consistent. Just, I always say, like, if they don't eat great, we're like, oh man, that's like totally can tell a difference, if we're not fueling our children as well, which is kind of an interesting concept that I didn't know anything about before we got into this journey. I like, some people listening to this are gonna be like, I don't have a clue what he's talking about, but it's really powerful when you learn.
And others of us are like, oh yeah, I can tell.
Well, so, everybody knows you feed your kids a bunch of sugar, they're gonna be like all over the place. And it's even more so like, there's other foods too that we just use it as a tool because it is such a part of like our relationship. It's I always like jokingly say it's a hobby. Like it's part of us. We love to go to like health food stores and look at products. Like that sounds funny, but it's like a thing that we do together. And we're like, okay, let's find a new restaurant. Like, is it great? Like, can we find stuff there that still fuels our body and that we can use to help us move towards our goals as far as being healthy people? So it's kind of fun that way.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to this in a second, but I just want to say, like in this context, we're talking about health and behavior, and what we have not mentioned once is weight loss, other than me saying that that was relevant for me. And we're going to bring this back to that. But before we do, I want to ask a question that I ask all guests on the Intimate Marriage podcast. And that is that I think of intimate relationship as the ultimate vehicle for personal growth. And so I'd love to ask you, Jared, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Joni?
Well, that's a really good question. I gotta like think about that. What have I learned about myself being married to Joni? Um, I feel like Joni, I don't know if this is going to answer the question directly, but I realize there's a lot of things that I wish I did better that she does. And so I just say, I just need to be like her, like in all these ways. And sure, like I'm sure she says the same thing about me and other things, but like there's so many things that I'm like, I feel like we're a good complement to each other in that way. But I've learned about myself that um, I don't know. That's a really good question. I have to like think how to verbalize that, vocalize it. But first is just things that I struggle with. Like she's really good at, and I want to be more like her. So areas of improvement. And that sounds like she's trying to put me down, but it's not. It's more like I just look at her as an
It sounds
example.
like inspiration.
An inspiration, totally. She's absolutely an inspiration in so many areas, especially having kids now. The last 4 years, it's like we parent the same, but like I respond way more like probably not in the appropriate ways that I should. And she's so good at it. And I just watch and learn and grow together. I don't know if that directly answers the question, but she's absolutely an inspiration that helps me learn to become a better human. I've learned and that's one thing I have learned that I think has been solidified for me is I always want to grow. I always want to become a better person, a better human. And it's not, our past is our past, and we just learn from it, and it's what you do with it. And that's something I've learned absolutely from Joni as far as just becoming the person I want to be consistently.
Hmm. What about you, Joni? What have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Jared?
That's a hard question. Um, Probably the biggest thing is how what have I learned about myself. I have to like keep verbalizing it. Um, I don't know. Something that Jared does so well is he's very selfless. Um, he's just always put me first 100%. And I feel like that's something that I've learned about myself is that I'm not necessarily that way, maybe by nature. And so I feel like he's a constant example of that to me is just like, how can I keep giving myself to him in lots of different ways and also like loving him the way that he wants to be loved rather than the way that I want to show him to be loved, stuff like that. He's really good at that. And so it's a great example for me of like, how can I keep loving him and serving him and showing him in the way that he um, needs to be shown, because we all have these ways, right? That we like to be shown how to be loved. And so he's just always really good at that. He's always really good to adapt and change and grow. So yeah, I would say
That's beautiful. Thank you. And I'm going to make a kind of a cheesy pivot because hearing you say that made me think of something. Because there's so many different kinds of methods and presentations and ways of facilitating weight loss, from Weight Watchers and 12-step programs and medical take this pill or have a shake or surgery or keto or paleo or vegan or whatever. And I only really started looking into this in a serious way, I'd say about 3 years ago, and tried a number of different things. And I feel like, Jared, you've created the program, which is my perfect love language for weight loss. And so I wonder if you would just say a little bit about it, because I wanted to talk to the two of you definitely to hear how health is central in your beautiful marriage. And also because anyone listening, I encourage you, if you want to lose weight a little bit or a lot, to check out Jared's program. The link will be in the show notes, and you get a discount if you mention that you found out about the program listening to this podcast. So with that, I'd love if you want to just share briefly about the program so somebody might know whether or not it sounds like their love language as well.
Sure.
Their weight loss love language.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, make sure if you do schedule with us or whatever, mention that you heard here, because we want to attribute that to this. So one of the main focuses that I've taken into my own life is sustainability. So we try to implement that into everything we do. So when we help someone lose weight, we actually don't help them lose weight. We help them focus on identifying as a healthy person, because that's what we found is the only thing that allows people to keep the weight off, is becoming a healthy person. Now that means physical, but it also means mental and how we think. And oftentimes identifying that we need to break through a lot of the diet culture patterns, right? We don't want to like binge restrict cycles, all or nothing, food guilt. We don't want to do the like calories in, calories out approach. So we only use real food that heals the body. We always talk about kind of the underlying issues of weight gain, and especially for people who we typically work with, which are women, usually a little older, that have kind of had hormone shifts and changes after their lovely age of like 40, 45 years old. There's other issues than just, hey, I'm a glutton and I'm eating McDonald's every day. Like, it's usually not the case. And so they've been calories in, calories out for many years. They've tried every diet on the planet for many, many times. And so we just say we need to address the real issues of why the body's storing fat and fix those, which are often things like hormone imbalances and cortisol and insulin and inflammation. So we only use real food for that, like simple stuff you can buy at the store, you can eat out with. We use vitamins, we use nutrients, we use food to fuel the body. And we also don't exercise to lose weight, which is super unique. So I say we don't count stuff, we don't track anything as far as like how many calories and points. We're not drinking shakes. Like, we want you to be able to feed your kids the same stuff you're eating, or your grandkids, or be able to go out to eat and travel or whatever. And so, and then long term, we also want to teach you how you can keep it off and still enjoy desserts and chips and crackers and treats and travel, and not have to like fit them in and, like exercise to kill yourself to keep it off. So, I mean, that's kind of like the gist of it all. We call it the Metabolism Reboot, because we're really focusing on a rebooting the metabolism. I always like to throw this out there. It's cliche weight loss, but our average is 20 to 45 pounds in 6 weeks. So it's really fun. It's very motivating, very fulfilling. But I always say weight loss is a side effect, because we're focusing on becoming a healthy person. So of course, physically we feel better. We have more energy. We have better mood stability, and brain fog goes away, and we sleep better. Now, a lot of those things start happening for a lot of people along with the weight loss, but we hope that people become the better and healthier version of themselves that they want to see. And that's kind of our whole focus, because I always say 90% of keeping the weight off is how you think and how you see yourself. So instead of trying to lose weight, we want you to identify as a healthy person. Like, that's really, I guess that's like the line. I always say, like, if I could just help you not focus on weight loss and focus on being healthy, that's kind of the key.
Well, you can hear that Jared finished his sentence, but he really wasn't done talking. It's just that I had a glitch with my Zoom and it stopped recording. So I'm just going to finish the episode myself. I have already thanked Jared and Joni for coming on the show, sharing their beautiful story, letting you feel the wonderful, rich, sacred connection that they have in their marriage, and how a mutual commitment to health really contributes to the vitality and excellence and intimacy in their marriage. If you're interested in finding out more about Jared's program, the Metabolic Reboot, you can click on the link in the show notes and go to his website and watch some of the videos to get more information. And if you decide to book a call to either speak with Jared or one of his colleagues, be sure to mention that you heard about the Metabolic Reboot on the Intimate Marriage Podcast, because Jared has very kindly offered a $150 discount for any listener from the Intimate Marriage Podcast. If you go ahead and sign up with his program, he'll give you a discount because you heard him and Joni speaking in this episode. So if you want more health and vitality through adjusting the food you eat, expanding your mindset, and losing weight as well, by all means, check out his program. I have loved doing it and can only really say good things about it. And with that, I invite you to message me on Facebook or send me a DM on Instagram. Find me on my website. You can fill out the contact form and let me know what you're thinking about. This was a different kind of an episode, a different emphasis. Did you like it? Did you learn from it? Do you have a critical feedback to give me? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, and please leave a rating and a review. And if you're ready to deepen your relationship and create a truly intimate, delicious, and vibrant marriage, head over to the Work With Me page at alexandrastockwell.com and choose the program that's right for you.